welcome along to Point Blank Music School, where today we're joined by the legendary DJ Krust for this instalment in our live Masterclass series. So Krust is here to talk to us a bit about his involvement in the scene, the history of his involvement in drum and bass and jungle, and to get a bit of an insight into his kind of creative approach to making music, really. So before we get into it, if you want to learn a bit more about music production, about drum and bass, then head over to pointblankonline.net and check out the drum and bass course. Also make sure you can like us on Facebook to keep up to date with all of our news. So yeah, let's get into it. Welcome along, Krust.
Thank you for having me.
So yeah, a firm fixture in UK sound system culture. You're founder of the Fullcycle label and a member of Represent.
Mm-hmm.
So before we get into that, can you give us a bit of background on yourself and how you got into making music and got into music in the first place?
It's a long story. I'll try and keep it brief. I came from a very musical family, so there was always music in the house, and so I grew up around Motown, Parliament, and those type of things. But the thing that really kind of made me want to get into the whole DJ culture was a film called Wild Style. When I saw that, it was kind of like an instant attraction. I saw these guys who had come from a similar background as myself that, were scratching and rapping and, breakdancing and stuff. And I immediately was like, yeah, I want to do that. And so for about the next sort of 3 or 4 years, me and my brothers and a few of our friends, we just kind of just mimicked what we saw on the video. We just watched the video nearly every day and just practiced the moves, watched how they were DJing. We got little jobs on the weekend and saved up some money, bought our first turntable, took that idea to a youth club, to school first, then to a youth club. Really just started doing local youth clubs all around the area in Bristol, an area called Knoll West and sort of Hartcliffe and Woodywood, Bedminster. And then we found a squat in Bedminster, and the guys just let us put our sound system in there, and we used to go there every day really after school and just make as much noise as we could. And then after we left school, we just kind of lived in there really. And there used to be a scout hut in the bottom of their garden, and we got some sledgehammers and we made our own door and we put tarpaulin over the roof, and that we started holding parties in there. And that's kind of how we, as Fresh 4, this is kind of like before Fullcycle and stuff, as a group called Fresh 4, that's how we kind of established our name in Bristol, by doing sort of warehouse parties on our side of town, because Bristol's quite a small place, but all the parties used to be on the other side of town. So for us, when we went out, we had to walk 5 miles.
Right. So you wanted something at home, basically?
Well, we wanted to kind of represent our side of town, because like a lot of people were around where we grew up with, they were into the culture, but they wouldn't necessarily go across the other side of town. And so for us, we were just sort of just doing what everyone was doing, because there was a few crews back in the day. There was Wild Bunch Now, Massive Attack. There was some guy crew called FBI, Too Bad, UD4, and they were all over that side of town. And so we just wanted to represent our side of town.
And so obviously at that point you've got your foot in the door, you're firmly into kind of Bristol's sound system culture. How did you then go into kind of making music and putting records together?
That happened by accident.
Right.
For me anyway. My brother made a track called Wishing on a Star.
Yeah, the Fresh 4 track.
Yeah, and that got signed to 10 Records, and then we got signed to do an album, and they just threw us in the studio.
It was a big hit though, right?
Yeah, it's massive.
Yeah.
I mean, for the time, yeah, it went to number 10 in the charts, and we got thrown in the deep end and stuff. And that for us, like we were like 20 years old, 19 years old, all of a sudden, we walk into a record company in London and we see Jazzy B and all these guys, and it was like, wow, do you know what I mean? Kind of crazy experience, but it was a very, very good learning curve for us all. So they put us in this studio and we didn't have a clue what was going on, and I saw the desk, I saw these lights and speakers and everything, and I was like, yeah, this is me. I want to learn, I want to know what's going on in this room. And the whole deal fell apart, but my brother had a sampler, and so for me, I just lived in his back room for about 3 years and just taught myself how to use the sampler, how to use the sequencer, the Atari at the time, and Cubase. And I just mastered it. I just stayed in it until I could competently make a beat by myself And you know,
And this is kind of like early rave kind of music, like
this is rave, yeah. Like, this is like really early. But I was
proto jungle sort of.
no, not even that. This was like Bristol music,
Right.
you know, like Portishead, Massive Attack, Tricky, down tempo, slow beats,
Right.
you know, real hip hop kind of, you know, what Bristol's kind of known for. So I was just messing around with breaks. Because of the DJing, we had a massive record collection. So we had a very varied record collection spanning, you know, from pop, reggae, electro, rock and roll, all types of music from very different genres. So we understood the breaks. So when we started to make lots of the early stuff, we had loads of breaks that we can draw from. And so when that slowly started to turn into what they now call jungle or drum and bass, you know, we were kind of just etching into it. And for us, it was really about speeding the beats up and just trying to understand how to make that work.
And so at this point, are you know DJ Dye? Are you working with him?
So in the squat, when we played in the squat, we used to hang out in the squat. Di used to live on top of the hill, and he used to hear the music. So he used to come down. He was a 14-year-old school kid, and when we met him, he was a skateboarder. So, you know, Di taught us how to skate.
And how about, you know, obviously
Sub, I met Sub on holiday when we were about 9 years old. Just kept in contact with him. He came to Bristol. His sisters lived around by us as well, so we kind of just met, started hanging out. He taught us breakdancing and stuff as well, so we kind of hung out from that. Roni, I met quite later on. Knew of him around in Bristol, but never actually met him. His brother was in the sound system. His brother had a sound system. His other brother was a DJ in his crew called UD4. So we kind of knew of him, and everyone knows of each other in Bristol, but we didn't actually meet until we were setting up the whole Fullcycle thing.
Yeah, I mean, that I was going to ask. So, you know, how did you guys? It was yourself, Size, Dye. How did you come to form Fullcycle?
Well, me and Dye and Sub, we were kicking around for a while. We were hanging out in the back of Smith and Mighty studio. They were very kind enough to give us their back room, and they put a computer in their speakers and a sampler, just enough so that we could have somewhere to make music and, you know, and be around them as well, because we were learning a lot from Smith and Mighty. They were really kind of like, you know, our first sort of musical mentors. You know, I got a lot of to thank those guys for. And so we were like, right, we had loads of records that we were making, loads of beats that we were doing. We just wanted an outlet for it, you know, and we tried sending out stuff to people. We weren't getting any response. We heard through the grapevine that Roni was doing the same thing. So we just sat down one day, talked about what, you know, all our frustrations and everything. And I think we probably tried a bit longer as well to send out more tunes. But in the end, it was like, you know, through pure necessity, rather than anything else. It wasn't like a great idea that we had, let's start this label, you know. It was like, no one else is putting out our records, fuck it, we'll do it ourselves.
Yeah.
And when we made that decision, it was like, yes, that's what we're all gonna do.
And what was the kind of the sound of Bristol at that time? You know, you say that there wasn't really an outlet for you guys. Were there lots of people making similar style music, or was it something that was kind of segregated to you guys?
Yeah, well, the people were experimenting. You got to remember, back in the day, there was probably about 5 or 6 people in Bristol who even had a studio, and less than that, whoever actually knew how to run a studio, use the equipment. So we're talking about maybe 4 people. You know, I could be exaggerating, but there could be, you know, a very small group of people that knew how to operate the equipment and making music. And so for us, making music was an extension of DJing. So we saw that as a way for us to actually create a niche for ourselves and create a brand identity. And so it was really about, you know, trying to create something that people would have to come to us for specifically. And so what we set out to do is create a certain type of music with the idea about what we were about in Bristol. So Bristol was renowned for house parties. So Thursday, Friday, Saturday and Sunday, every single week you could go out to a house party. And for us, it was a very kind of fun time in Bristol where the music was really creative and it was very diverse culture. In one party you could see punks, skinheads, rockers, mods. Every type of genre was catered for in these parties, and so our musical history and our musical taste was very eclectic. And so when we were going back into making music, that was our approach. And so we were trying to make music that sounded like the type of parties that we went to. And so when people listened to our music, they said it sounded like funk, it sounded like jazz. You know, it sounded like a lot of things. You know, we were drawing influences from a lot of these genres that we were passionate about. So we'd sample breaks from pop, riffs from jazz. You know, we'd study classical music and learn chords and stuff. So we were really just trying to bring the Bristol vibe in our records and let the rest of the world know what we were about.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was going to say, we brought a couple of your tracks down, some of the older stuff. I think there's a CD just on the side. I was going to ask, I mean, we've got Witchcraft that you did with Roni Size, which we can take a listen to.
We've got a few other things. We've got True Stories, Future Unknown as well.
This one's Witchcraft that you did with Size in about '94, I think.
Yeah.
So what's your approach when you went into the studio making this?
We don't really. Sometimes we would go in and we would research loads of samples, and we would go in there and we'd have a batch of stuff that we particularly wanted to use in a track. Other times we would just go in there and just make noise. We would just get loads of breaks up, start chopping them up, and just see what would happen. I don't think there was a particular specific approach to trying to make a track. It's really how you felt on the day, what caught your attention, in the studio. Like I said, sometimes we'd go out shopping, second-hand shops, and just buy loads and loads of breaks, and you'd hear something specifically in a record, and right, you take exactly, or you'd be in there just messing around with synths, and you just come up with a bass line and stuff. So there wasn't really a specific approach. I think with this track, what we tried to do was try to really just have some fun, in the sense that Rob Playford asked us to make this track for his one in 4, I think it was called, so it was a series that a couple of people were going to do, and the whole series would make up 12 records. And for us, we saw that as an opportunity to do something we didn't normally do.
I mean, that's something that doesn't really happen now that much. It's a nice way to build a package.
Yeah.
You don't get so much now.
Yeah, and I think we saw that as an opportunity to do something we don't normally do, but also to really push the boundaries and stretch ourselves. And so when we approached it, we just really sat down and really thought about, where are the sounds that we want to use, what do we normally do, and then we just, what was a really good thing about Fullcycle is that we were very competitive with each other.
Right, okay.
Yeah, very highly competitive.
It's a tight crew,
yeah, for sure, fierce competition. But that's what drove us. That's what made us want to be better producers. That's what made us want to be better, editing. We'd do these real finicky edits and say to each other, listen to that, and everyone would be like, wow, how did you do that? I can do something better. And that really brought the best out of all of us, you know what I mean? Because we, in a short space of time, we really excelled as producers, really, really far. And I think that healthy competition is important when you're trying to create something that's not been done before. And what we were trying to do is trying to challenge ourselves as artists, as producers, and as people to go beyond our boundaries, go beyond our comfort zones. And being in that crew, we were able to give each other permission to go outside of our boundaries, and that's what helps us become, so successful as producers and artists.
And so, when you are, this is out on Fullcycle with this track?
This was out on Moving Shadows.
On Moving Shadows, okay.
Yeah.
And so, once you got into later stuff, I think the next one is Warhead.
Yeah.
Can you give that one a play, Warhead? Which I think is probably one of your most recognisable tunes. I think.
Yeah. So this tune was a pure revenge tune, really.
Right, okay. Oh, again, composition.
Yeah, total composition. I heard Roni and Di making a track called Mad Professor.
Right.
And I went in the studio and I heard them making it. I was like, wow, this is amazing.
Before it was finished?
Yeah, halfway through. And I just heard it, and it's so much energy in the track. And I was like, wow, it just inspired me, really. I just wanted to make a better track.
So yeah, I was going to say, you guys are obviously a very close unit, right?
Yeah.
You work together, also kind of swapping tunes with each other and playing each other's tracks.
Yeah.
Do you think it's still, you know, a very important thing? Would you, to guys that are coming through, young producers, would you say working with a crew, with a group of mates is a good thing to do? Is it something important?
Well, let's look at it from an Apple point of view. You know, how important is the cross connectivity in Apple, the multidiscipline aspects of each individual person in Apple. You know, you've got people who work on different sections to make what the iPhone is. Without those different disciplines, it'd probably be a bland, ordinary phone. You know, the way that Apple have approached their products shows you how important people are from different backgrounds. I don't exactly know what the backgrounds are, but I guarantee they've got people from a cross-section of society, a cross-section of cultures, all contributing to this one phone, and that's why it's so successful. So that's what we had at Fullcycle. We had people with different backgrounds. Myself, I've got a hip-hop kind of, you know, funk background. You've got Di with his folk and live music, you know, punk background. You've got Roni with his reggae, electronic kind of soul background. You've got Sub with his kind of reggae and hip-hop background. So we're all very diverse people, all from, Di's from Cornwall, Sub's from Brighton, Ronnie's from the one side of Bristol, I'm from Knoll West. So we've got this very diverse group of people with very diverse backgrounds, but all understanding what makes something work and how to work together as a crew and as an organisation. When you mix those things together and put in there a little bit of competition as well, you come up with stuff like this. Yeah. So the short answer to your question, yes, it's very important. You need people around you that can push you, that will challenge you. I talk a lot about getting out of your comfort zone. If you stay comfortable, you're always going to get what you're always going to get. And that's what we're seeing now in the culture. It's pervasive. People just doing the basics and expecting a maximum. It's not going to really work. If you really want to create something really outstanding, you've got to go so far out of your comfort zone that it makes you uncomfortable. In that uncomfortableness, something unique will come.
Is that something that might happen with Warhead?
When I made Warhead, I was already way out in the wilderness. You know, I was way out there. I was smoking a lot of weed and just really experimenting with, you know, sleep deprivation and, you know, trying to do things that were really alien to me as well. I was really pushing my own boundaries. And so, you know, I speak to lots of people, and when I talk to them about their work rate, and this is fundamental, most people's work rate is nowhere near up to a level to try and create something pioneering. And what I mean by that is, to make a track like Warhead, you have to make about 20 tracks all in a row. And only the last 3 you'll actually hear. There's probably about 14 other tracks that I made at the same time that no one will ever hear. Yeah. They're still on that, but they're parts of experimenting. You're making a track, you make another track, you make another track, okay, you make another track, okay, and so you're doing this process over and over and over and over and over and over again until you've exercised a new muscle. And here's the thing, what most people haven't really, I'm not saying they haven't really got, but here's something that I've noticed with most people that I speak to in the music business. They stick to a formula when they're making music. And so they're trying to make something new, and they'll stick to the same thing over and over and over again. And then they'll switch off and they'll make something new, which doesn't sound like anybody else. And then they'll get scared. And then they'll go back to what they normally do. But that's the hit.
Yeah. I mean, something like this, for example.
Something like this was one of those ones where I went outside of the box. When I played this to everybody else, nobody liked it.
I mean, it still sounds pretty fresh, pretty unique today, right?
But you got to understand, when I did it, no one liked it.
Really?
No one liked it. We liked it, but when I played it to a few other people out there, they didn't like it. It took a year before the track became the track it is now.
Right.
So that's what I'm talking about. If I didn't understand the process or have a close group of people around me, I probably would have scrapped it. I would have done it. I would have played it to people outside of my crew first, and they would have said nah, and I would have said, oh right, it's not any good, and then I would have scrapped it. But what I did is I kind of knew in myself that it was different, and I stuck with it. I played it to my guys, and they were like, yeah, that's really good, and they stuck with it, and that gave me the confidence to play it out, and then to give it to Brian and to give it to Frost, and they were like, yeah, and even though when we played it out initially, people were like, but we knew through our experience that that just meant that they're not used to it. And they have to become, people have to get used to doing something new. And that process sometimes takes a year, and that's what happened with this track. It took a year before it really became, what it is today.
And so to move slightly later than that, I think to talk about Represent for a second, that came slightly after this?
Oh, yeah, a lot after, yeah.
And how did you guys come to get together?
What, as Represent?
Yeah.
We were already together as Fullcycle.
Oh, right, okay.
So Represent really wasn't really, it wasn't really much of a leap.
Extension of it.
It was an extension, yeah. And, so we got signed. A few record labels were, looking at us, and
I guess the scene at the time was pretty.
The scene was fresh.
In the limelight.
Yeah, it was fresh. It was brand new. We were doing the End regular, and so it was just something unique. A lot of people were coming through jungle and drum and bass. A lot of celebrities, a lot of film people, just a lot of people who were curious to hear what this new sound was about. And through that, Talking Loud got interested, and a few other people, and we started to speak to Paul Martin and Giles Peterson, and they showed a lot of interest in what we were doing, but they were also very encouraging about what we could do as artists, and they gave us a lot of free rein. And
they didn't put any limitations.
No. They were really open to what we were doing and a lot of our ideas. And Roni had the idea to do Represent, and we kind of backed him with that. It was something new, and about what we were about was always pioneering something new. So we saw that as a challenge. To try and produce this project that could potentially go live.
And the debut album obviously won the Mercury Music Prize, New Forms. How did you guys kind of approach that record when you went to the studio? Well,
that was mostly Ronnie's baby, but we'd come in and out of the studio. We have this thing where we just, if someone would be in the studio and they'd be nodding their head, we knew we were on the right track. We weren't the type of people that would need constant reassurance. Yeah, that's great, that's great. A simple head nod, that was enough for us. Then we know we're on the right track.
Just to get a vibe in the studio.
Yeah, just to get a vibe. We were very confident about what we were doing as DJs and as musicians and as artists and as creative people. I think what we gave each other was just that extra boost to just push ourselves a little further and to do something a little bit out of the box, and that would be enough for us.
And so obviously we've talked quite a bit about the kind of the days back then. Are you kind of moving forward with bringing you up to date? Are you still kind of employing some of those techniques, whether it be like creatively as opposed to technically? Are you still employing that in making music today?
Oh, for sure. I've extended it now. I've learned a lot about creativity. I've taken some time out about the last sort of 6 years really, and started to study psychology, spirituality, consciousness, how people are creative, what business is, and what the entertainment business is as well. And I've really kind of developed myself and tried to understand where I'm going for the future and what I'm doing, and it's really been a big learning curve for me. And I've started to do workshops and coaching and mentoring and helping people develop themselves as well, based on what I've learned, and adding some new techniques in it, new ways of thinking. And really, it's just been a really fun and enjoyable journey. And yeah, I've created a new label, and I've got some new music coming.
Okay,
I've got
cool.
a new group of people around me as well. So yeah, it's just been a really exciting time.
And how about the way you make music? The process, is that something that's, I guess, it's evolved quite a bit from back?
Oh yeah, it's radically changed. So back in the day, we had the sampler, which we were limited to by how big the memory was. And maybe drum machines or keyboards and stuff. So everything was about sampling and putting it in internally. And I specifically worked in a way that I kind of just got used to through using Atari and Cubase and stuff. Now it's kind of evolved in the sense that because of what we can do with hard drives and the space and just we don't have to finish tunes with Pro Tools and Logic and stuff. So the process for me now, it's really about kind of just building phrases and using the computer as a library. And so I really now what I do is I don't really try and make tracks anymore. I just work on ideas and then just use that as kind of like a puzzle idea. So I'll make a phrase and then I'll just leave it, and then I'll make another phrase and leave it, and then work on some drums and then leave it, and then just pick a mix. I'll just try and find some things that kind of work together. If they don't work together, try and make them work together. And that way there, it's really just giving me more freedom creatively to do stuff that I don't normally do. So for me right now, it's just about not necessarily making myself uncomfortable, but definitely working in a way that I don't normally work.
Yeah.
And for me, that's really been a godsend. How that process started for me was I was working, I did a project for Standard Music, which is a library music company, and they said, well, you can do whatever you like. You can make a tune for like 5 seconds or a tune for 4 minutes. And I was like, really? You know, and I studied a bit of some of the people that were making library music, and I was blown away by what they were doing. And that's kind of my approach to making music, just loads of little ideas. And I was really excited by that whole process. And so I just stayed in the studio for about nearly 6 weeks, not making any music, and it was great.
Yeah.
And from that point of view, I was like, oh, this is actually, it showed me a totally different way to approach music, which now I do all the time. And what's happened with that now is that over the last 2 years I've made these batches of tracks that are totally new and in totally different direction than what I'm normally doing, but it's been a really organic experience. I haven't felt the pressure of finishing a track. And that's been really freeing as well. And I think it was yesterday, the day before, I compiled like some tracks, and I've got this, it's looking like I've got a new album, and I haven't even tried to make it. And it's really been really interesting project for me. So I took a step back and looked at that and thought, well, that's really interesting. So it's one of my most creative projects. It's been the most easiest to make and the most fun to make, and I haven't had like a time constraint or pressure to finish it in any way or any fashion, or for anyone. So I'm quite happy with the way that it's come out.
And I guess, obviously, looking at the way people make music today is very different. The kind of the options that you have are endless. And you say, kind of taking away any kind of pressure is a good thing. But I guess on the other side, sometimes limiting your options and the way you can make music can be a good thing as well.
Well, I purposely have not used certain things anymore so that I can do that, and I'm exercising that idea of really limiting myself. So I make 90% of my music comes from one keyboard, so Roland V-Synth. So I use that as my bass. I don't really work too much in the box per se. I don't really use much of the soft synths or anything like that. I use a Moog, I use an ARP Odyssey, and I use the V-Synth. So the V-Synth is a sampler. So I sample everything into the V-Synth, and I make up my patches, or I re-edit a lot of the patches in there. So I just try and create all my textures in there, and then I put it into the box afterwards. And so for that reason, it really works for me, because I like the idea of having a sampler as my engine and as the center of my studio. I'm not too keen on using a soft synth sampler, although there's nothing wrong with that. I prefer to use something outside where I can create more of a texture.
A bit more hands-on as well.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And so I do like to go to the box where I'd go and, I use the box as like a tool to paint the colors. So I just go in there and layer up and just use it as a tool to manipulate and really just print, really. So I put it in there, print. If there's stuff in there that I want to add on to make more textures, I'll do that. But then sometimes I'll probably bounce it back into the sampler and go again, chop it up, and then create another texture, another sound. And so my cycle and my sound, really my whole library is built up of the last 10 years of doing that process, from back in the Fullcycle days of making some sounds, putting them into the tune, resampling the sounds, and just constantly going around in that circle. That's the same way I do now. So I'm not actually trying to look for anything new. I already have a sound batch that I use. I just recycle it and resample and exaggerate or take away or put filters on, or
try and find new creative ways to make use of it.
Yeah. So really, for me, I find that fun. I use a sound that really is inspiring, and then I'll use that as my bass, and then work on sounds around it to try and complement that, or the beat complement the beat, or the vocal, or just really trying to create palettes that really work with each other, or not.
Yeah. And so to talk about, drum and bass and jungle, obviously you've been, involved in the scene for a number of years, been quite at the heart of it, have seen things grow and change. Do you have thoughts on the way things are at the moment?
Well, I think to still focus on drum and bass jungle is a bit short-sighted.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
I think what's interesting is the whole way the music or the entertainment industry is moving. So I'm more focused on what the entertainment industry as a whole is doing rather than just what the music scene is doing. I actually I'm more interested in the way everything's converging now. Everything everywhere all at once. And so when I think about it like that, I'm more excited about the possibilities of how music can fit into the culture that I'm now going towards. And so I see film as something that's viable. I see games as something that's viable. I see, music as part of these things that maybe hold them together. But I also see the talks that I do as part of this as well. I also see, art as part of it as well. I also see, technology as being a fundamental part of it as well. So what I'm figuring out and what I'm working towards is how do all of these things work together in one place? How do I make this work as an idea going forward? How do I put films in my videos or my books or the talks or the merch? Whatever it is, I'm interested in the whole package now. I've grown up with an interest of culture and how culture moves, and that's probably what was my real excitement about Wildstar. It wasn't the fact that they were just DJing. It wasn't the fact they were just spray painting. It wasn't the fact that they were rapping. It wasn't the fact that they were breakdance. It was the fact they were doing all of it.
Yeah,
that's whole thing. Exactly. That's what excited me, and that's what excited me in the beginning of Jungle Drum and Bass. We had that idea. That idea now is crossed over to the entertainment world, where we're being able now to understand how to use all of these things together. And you can see where you look at someone like, Jay-Z or Pharrell or, what's his name, Damon Dash with Creative Cultures. They're combining everything now, and they're understanding that we are consumers. And so from that point of view, how do we consume, what do we consume, and how can I provide something from my perspective as a creative person that you'll find interesting and want to consume.
And do you think that's, I was going to ask you about, kind of upcoming producers. Obviously, point blank, we've got a lot of guys who are looking to break it into the industry, whether that be purely in music, in sound design for film and TV, like you say. Do you think it's an important thing to bear in mind, everything as a whole, being able to kind of
for sure.
look at everything?
Yeah, let's just take a step back. Let's look at the iPod. Look what the iPod has done for the whole generation. It's unified the whole game. iTunes is the biggest music distributor in the world. So let's try and understand where this whole thing's going. It's not necessarily about just being involved in music. It's understanding what you have as a whole person and how people are going to buy into you as a whole person. So it's a good idea to try and understand how you fit into the culture that you're moving towards. We all have lots of things about us that's interesting that people want to know about now. It's just trying to understand how that fits into where you're heading. And if it doesn't, how can you create that? Don't be limited by what's on offer. Think about how you can create your own ecosystem. That's what's exciting, and all the tools are there for that to happen now. And this is unprecedented. How I view, we right now are on the cutting edge of human existence. No human's been where we're going right now. That's what's so exciting about what's going on right now. This is the front line. So there's no rules. Anyone can do anything. There's a 14-year-old kid now developing the new app that's going to make him a billionaire overnight.
That's right.
And the technology's there for it to happen. So we're already seeing 14-year-old geniuses right now. They're out there, and they've grown up, with the internet. So now you imagine a kid being born now. They're internet ready. You know what I'm saying? They're like 10, 25 HP ready. They don't know anything else but digital. So you got to imagine, I'm 40, right? So you got to imagine I grew up in the cassette era, right? And I know what I know now. So imagine a kid coming into the era today. 2012, right? They're just that. Do you know what I'm saying? That's light speed.
Yeah.
So that's what's exciting. You've got the next generation coming in, ready, hooked up into the internet, ready to just do whatever needs to be done. And they don't have the learning curve that we have. And we've all heard stories about children playing with iPads, playing with iPods, and they're 3, 4 years old, and they get it. They get the motion. They're going out on the screens, and then they go to ordinary TV and try to do the same thing. I've done it myself. I've been in my studio and I've looked at the screen and I've tried to go like, and I'm like, It's not, but that's where we're going. So that's what's exciting. So from my point of view, I'm thinking, how do all these things work together? Don't limit yourself just to music, just to film, just to this, just to that. It's like they are all working together now.
Well, I think we might actually have some questions from some of the internet-ready guys at home.
Good.
That's fine. Cool. Okay. So we've got one from HFS who asks, who is it that you kind of respect in the music industry today? From a production standpoint, is there any kind of artist working at the moment that you really kind of worth mentioning?
There's so many. Flying Lotus springs to mind. That whole Brain Feeder outfit, incredible what they're doing over there. Alex the Kid, great producer. All the obvious ones as well: Timbaland, Kanye, Pharrell.
I mean, the kind of the Brain Feeder one is quite an interesting one, I think.
To me, they remind me of Jungle back in the day.
Yeah, definitely.
When I hear what those guys are doing, it just reminds me about how we started off. Just that infectious, don't give a fuck type of attitude.
It's a pretty close scene as well. They're all kind of in LA. They're all kind of on the same wavelength.
Yeah, and it's like I said, it reminds me of what we were about. They've got it down, and they've got a sound as well that it just. Exactly. It sounds like they're not even interested in what's going on in the rest of the world. Yeah. They're confident in what they're doing, and they're happy to do that. And that's what is inspiring me right now, to go back to my roots and think, you know what, that's how we used to be, and that's what I'm doing again. So I'll play some music later and people can hear that.
Cool. We've got another one from Tord Bergstrom, who asks, is Fullcycle going to make a comeback at any point?
I know of, but you know what? Yeah, I'm open.
Bring the Good Times has asked, where would you say that the scene is heading? It's a tough one. It's a big one.
Yeah, the scene will head at the moment to whoever has got the strongest ideas, and if the artists are actually making the music for themselves and not so that they can get booked on the weekend, the music will radically change. And people, see, human beings, we gravitate. We use logic or we use passion. Right now, to me personally, this is how I see it. The music is a very logical scene right now. It's very technical, it's very analytical, and it's very focused on what the music sounds like. And there's not much kind of like passion or soul in it at the moment. And when you get passion and soul in something, you get what the Brain Feeder guys do.
Yeah, I mean that kind of leads us on to the next question actually. London Daisy has asked, what's the best way to get feeling into your music?
Just be yourself, switch off. There isn't a best way. All you have to do is stop making music for other people. You've got to be selfish when you're making music. When you make music from the heart, right, people won't like it in the beginning. And that's what people need to understand, need to get over. Everyone wants to be popular. But you'll be popular when you make music from the heart. People will talk about you being a real person with authenticity. And that's the key. Most people forget that. It's not taught in school, and it's definitely not taught in music colleges. And it's just, but you got to understand that when you look at any type of art form, there's certain people who are technically gifted, and they're out there. You see a film that's technically brilliant, but the story might not be very good. And then you can see a film where it's not technically good, but the story is amazing. And we're seeing that now. We're seeing all these low-budget films that are smashing in the box offices, and they're just stories. There's no special effects. There's no Hollywood budget. It's just a great story. And that's what music is about. It's like, let's hear your story. Let me hear what you're about. And it doesn't have to be a technically great record. I can detect your emotion. That's what I'm saying about human beings. We can feel the emotion and the intention in the music. And that's what Jungle was back in the day. None of us were technically any good. None of us knew how to mix, not to the degree we know to how. Listen back to that stuff. Technically, it's rubbish, right? But spiritually and emotionally, it's got tons of it in there. You hear people putting their heart and soul in the music. That's why that scene did what it did. And I'll give you a great example of that. Watch the documentary on iPlayer, if it's still on there, about Punk Britain. That sums up exactly what I'm saying. Pure heart.
Yeah.
Those guys, they got a music sheet and it's got 3 chords in it. This is your first chord, this is your second chord, this is the third chord, now start a band. That's what it was about. So that's what the whole music business was about back in the day. Pure heart. There was nothing technical about it.
We've got another question from Jen Det, who's asked if you still go out raving now. Still go out dancing, go to clubs?
I went out the other night actually. I actually did go out raving. I had a good time, it was fun.
Another one from Bring the Good Times, who's asked if the new way that you make music, as you were talking about kind of building phrases, is it something that when you do that, do you find it difficult to get the cohesion between them right away?
I don't care about that.
Right.
And that's the beauty about doing it. I mean, you got to understand where this is about, where you're coming from as an artist and what you're trying to do. I actually like the idea of having a track that doesn't make any sense at all. To me, that's creativity in another format. And so for me, if you listen to any of my tunes, they don't really make sense, And it's not because I'm not trying to make sense. It's that's the way I think. I'm trying to jump from one place to another, very kind of intuitively. And sort of, when we're talking about that type of creativity, there's no logic in that whatsoever. And it's not trying to make sense. So if you look at nature, there's no straight lines in nature. And so everything is about how intuition works, or how creativity works, or how this goes there, or how that goes there. There's nothing like logical about that. And so I'm just trying to do what I find natural to me, and the way that my music comes out, it's natural and it feels comfortable for me, so I leave it. I don't try and fix it in so it makes sense to other people. To me, that's the wrong approach. That's staying in the comfort zone. For me, it's about putting these pieces together, making myself feel uncomfortable. If I feel uncomfortable when I'm doing something, then I know I'm in the right direction. And if I play you it and you're kind of unsure, then
another tick the box.
Yeah, exactly. Because I know if you get it straight away, then you're really creative or you're out there. If you don't, that means you're going to get used to it. And that means then it's a new idea and eventually it will be popular.
So let's just see if we've got any more questions, Nick. Couple more. Cheers. Okay, cool. So this one from Chase Bigwood, who's asked a big question: is vinyl dead?
Oh yeah, a long time ago.
You'd still say that even with sales going up?
Yeah, listen, I'm the biggest vinyl fan, right? And I was the original CD MP3 hater, right? Trust me, I hated on everybody that was doing it. But what I soon came to realize is people don't buy vinyl, people buy music. So we buy the music on the format that it comes on. When I thought about it like that, it wasn't a problem anymore, because I'm interested in selling my music. I have to be able to figure out where my next set of audience is coming from. So we need to think of it totally different. We have made the mistake, people over 20 right now have made the mistake to think that technology is for us. It's not. It's not. It's for the kids. Think about when technology was made when we were little. Our parents didn't have a clue. The technology was being made for us. We, the children back then, we were driving the technology for video games, for new things. They tested on. You know why SMX text became big? Because kids were using it. Now it's normal. It wasn't because old people were using text that the companies figured out. It was young kids were using text. That's why it became so big. So technology, okay, we're the ones making it, but the young people are the ones who are driving it. So when you think about that, the kid now who's internet ready, do they care about vinyl? Who is the biggest consumers of music today? It's not us. So when we got to wake up and we got to understand, so let's look at the definition of a business, right? Something you sell a product for a profit, right? That's the definition of a business. If you're not doing that, it's a hobby. So if you're in business and you're in the music industry and you're trying to sell stuff and people aren't buying it, then you haven't got a business.
Yeah.
You're doing it for a hobby. So it's just about understanding what you're doing, why you're doing it, and then reframing and understanding that this is what I do for a living. So then I need to meet my customers where they are. I can't try and tell a young 10, 15-year-old who wants to listen to my music, who's only got a smartphone, that he should go out and buy a turntable and a mixer and be a purist. It's just not realistic. So I have to meet them where they are, and they are listening to stuff on a smartphone. So I'm just going to cut off my nose to spite my face because these kids are not interested in vinyl. That makes no sense whatsoever. So that's the difference between a business and a hobby.
Yeah. We've got another
But saying
one.
that, I'm not against vinyl.
Yeah.
And I do intend to put vinyl out, but I'm not all about
But maybe
it
do both, I guess.
I'm cool with anything.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, let's not get caught up on what vinyl was, because no one talks about cassettes.
Yeah, that's true.
No one talks about, the death of the cassette. It's like, you know what? That's the way we used to consume
vinyl
music.
sounds better. People do say
It's an organic sound, but if you want that organic sound, take the MP3, go and record it onto a cassette. Listen, I guarantee you half of those people who talk about vinyl don't even have a record player in their house.
Well, we've got another question from Assad, who's asked, how would an underground producer go about breaking into the scene and kind of get their music noticed, get heard?
Create an original sound that no one's heard before and pioneer it, and spend the next 10 years of your life championing it. And that's the only real way. The scene now is saturated with so much music. The only way to cut through is to try and have something that's truly unique. I am looking out for that. I'm looking for artists that are really on the cutting edge on all levels. And as well, if you're going to create a music, you need to create your own ecosystem as well that will support that. And that's vital, and that's what most people really haven't figured out yet. And that's the next part of it as well. Most people make a record and then they'll try and convince other people of how good it is. That sometimes works because you get a lot of forward-thinking artists that do jump on that. But from a Fullcycle point of view, when we started doing what we were doing, very few people were supportive in the beginning. We were pushing it, Brian G and Frost was pushing it, and after a while it became something that people got into, and that's because of consistency as well. So when you have a new idea, you have to be prepared to work at it and be consistent at it as well. So you can't, this is what I'm saying about making 20 tracks. So everything I'm saying always comes back to the same point again. When you're making this new music, you have to make so much of it that people know you for it, and you're consistent at it, and that only happens after a long period of time. So what most people do, they make 1 or 2 records, they don't get any response, and then they change what they're doing to fit in with what everybody else is doing, because they think that they'd rather just make music and have it liked by somebody than be unpopular for 2 or 3 years, or until their sound becomes the norm. And that's quite a difficult challenge. And I remember in the beginning when I put out a couple of my tracks through V and Fullcycle, nothing happened. And it was quite, as an artist, it's quite,
demoralizing, yeah.
It's demoralizing, yeah. But because we had our ecosystem and the people around us, they said keep going. And I knew myself that my sound was a different sound, and eventually it would catch on.
If you believe in it enough, you're going to keep at
Yeah,
it.
you got to have that self-belief, and it's a bit of like self-belief definitely, and it's a bit of confidence in your own abilities as an artist as well, and as well how serious are you and how long are you intend to be in the game. So I always say, if you're trying to be a weekend wonder, forget about it. If you want a 10-year career, then think about what your goal is after 10 years, because in the first 2 years, you spend that time learning the equipment. The next 2 years, you spend that copying other people. The next 2 years, you spend that unlearning what you've learned. The next 2 years, you spend that figuring out what your style is. That's 8 years. The next 2 years, you figure out how to monetize what you do. So that's a 10-year learning cycle. That's an average learning cycle to become a stable artist in the industry. And if you can get through all of that, then people will start seeing you as someone with credibility, respectability, authenticity, loyal to your scene, and someone with promise as well. Because after the 10 years, it's like Kung Fu. When you get the black belt, then you're ready to train.
So I think if we've got any more questions, Nick? No. I think we'll probably wrap things up there. It's just enough time to say a big thank you for coming down and speaking to us. And also for everybody watching at home, make sure you head over to pointblankonline.net or check out the YouTube channel and the Facebook for more information. And we'll see you very soon. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.